Hello and welcome to another edition of Ask the AD. Brian Smoller with the Director of Athletics, Gene Taylor. Glad you could join us. A lot of good questions for this week's edition of Ask the AD. In fact, couldn't get all of them in. We're trying to get as many as we can within respective time. Jay will kill us if it's over 10 minutes, so we're trying to keep it under 10 minutes. Anyway, we start first with what's been circulating a little bit around this time of year. Really, when you're in the off season of any major sport, you get the stuff circulating about coaches and assistant coaches and all those things. And really, from a philosophical perspective here at Kansas State, assistant coaches' salaries and trying to stay competitive with Power 5 peer institutions, what's your philosophy? What's K-State's abilities there?
You know, Brian, it's a great question, and I understand that I don't want to lose any staff member or any coach to another institution. And we want to be as aggressive as we can with our salaries, and we try to. We're the lowest budget in the Big 12 from a revenue perspective. We're at $83 million. The highest is Texas at $200+ million. Obviously, there's every Power 5 institution has that range, whether in the Big 10 or the SEC or the ACC. So there's always a range within institutions, and so we look at our salary ranges. Can we be competitive in the upper half of the Big 12? Are we that in all cases? Not necessarily. We've been very aggressive with our football assistants when Bill Snyder retired, and we were able to change some money around. We just actually upped some contracts this year at the end of this football season pretty aggressively with our assistants. But there comes a point where we have to be able to say, you know, we don't have a max necessarily, but we do have comparative positions that we have to look at. But we want to be as aggressive as we can to keep, but at some point there are institutions out there that can pay a lot more than we can, and we have to be fiscally responsible based on the money that we have. And everything's tied together, right? The more revenue we can generate, whether it's through ticket sales or donations. You know, we talk about ESPN3 in Big 12 now, and that was a frustration. Well, in the future, those kind of connections will help us go out and negotiate a much better contract, which is more revenue, then we can get on a higher plane. So we do everything we can to keep them. We're aggressive as we possibly can, but there is going to be a limit at some point where we just have to say thanks for being here, but they're going to pay a lot more, and that's kind of money probably we can't get to.
Right. And from a revenue standpoint, just for those who may not understand, they see construction projects ongoing, which we're going to talk about here in a second. It's not all tied together, I suppose, in some respects. And the question I think was raised, how can you spend X amount of millions of dollars on construction but not be able to have it for coaches?
And that's a fair question. And what you have to kind of look at it from an operational perspective. Operationally, the day with the salaries, schedules, travel, equipment, et cetera, that's our almost $84 million budget. The facility projects, those are separate fundraised projects that we go out and, like this South End Zone is a $50+ million project. We've gone out and raised that money specifically for that. That really doesn't come into the play of our overall operational budget. So they are separate, and we do separate campaigns for those in terms of where that money comes from.
It's been great to see the Wildcat fan base get so excited about each project that's been going on. We'll talk about baseball in a minute, but speaking of the South End Zone project, our first questions are really a twofold question. Mm-hmm. The first one is about when will it be completed, and will the general public have access to that very cool lounge area that's going off of Bramlage Coliseum?
You know, those are great questions, and I appreciate that, and we haven't had a chance to really talk about it since construction started. So it's basically a 2-year construction project. So this year, when you come in the fall of 2020, the new video boards will be up, and there'll be a sound system in place, and you'll see a lot of steel connected to Bramlage. That will eventually be the new seating area, premium seating area. You will have access to the concourse. There obviously won't be restrooms or concession areas in there. There's no restrooms there currently. They still use the east and west side. But every game you will be able to get through the concourse, get to your seats, but you'll be walking under, you know, steel. And so that'll be in place, and you'll see probably each week a progression more and more. The premium area was a question. The
lounge area,
that won't be available till 2021. And so that's when that will be fully completed, is in 2021.
Now, the other question we had here from AC6 is about fans in the upper rows of the South End Zone. I know they are kind of fenced off for the moment, so will they still have their seats?
Yeah, I believe our ticket office has reached out to those fans that have season tickets that are affected. There are, I think, the top 3 or 2 rows that will no longer be in existence, and we have reached out to those fans and said, okay, here are your options. One thing we haven't talked about is the visiting section. That has been changed, and so we opened up a lot of seats. We moved the visiting section up to the upper deck, similar to what we get when we go. So that opened up a lot of seats in the South End Zone for those people to move to. and obviously there'll be some non-renewals. So those people have been contacted. They get priority to re-seat in the South. But there are the top 3 rows that were affected in this project.
Speaking of projects, the baseball soccer project has finally had a bow on it and then completed and been unveiled for everybody. Baseball is going to get 16 of 18 games in March at home at the new renovated face-look of Tointon Family Stadium. It looks great.
It is awesome. Just as soccer was a phenomenal facility and the athletes really enjoyed it. We had a great event a week or so ago with our National Leadership Circle members to go through and see it, and everybody was just so impressed. It's such a change, and it's going to be a welcome addition, and it's going to help our baseball program a great deal. It's a beautiful facility.
One of the things they've added at baseball are new chairback seats all across the seating bowl, new green chairbacks. So that led to this question, the next question that comes from K-State Man 14. Why hasn't Bramlage added chairbacks to the rest of the arena minus the student section?
That's a great question, and again, is part of, if you were to go back to our overall capital project, our facility master plan, there is some plans for Bramlage. If you look at that price tag, it's about $80 million, and a lot of that's in that piece of the puzzle. So we're going to wait until we finish the south end zone and some of the other priorities, and then at some point we'll come back and have a fundraising effort specifically to Bramlage and do a lot of upgrades to Bramlage. But for now, we're going to focus on the south end zone, and there are some pieces of Bramlage touch, the east and west entrances, and obviously the Legends Room.
It should get people pretty excited about the future of basketball as well. All right, back to football. A question from our good friend Scott Wildcat, who asked, has the decision on general concession beer sales for the 2020 football season been made?
You know, Scott has a lot of focus on alcohol.
He certainly
so that's good, Scott.
He's
Appreciate you. You know, there hasn't been, and what we are going to do, at least the plan is during this fall, is come up with a survey to ask that question of our fans, of which do they prefer to have alcohol, not have alcohol, have pass outs, have not pass outs. And we haven't finalized that survey yet. We don't know exactly at what point it'll be ready in the season, but we want to focus on our season ticket holders, individual game buyers, and so some people will get them electronically, the season ticket holders probably. Some will get them at the game. Some people may get a chance to answer it twice. And so we'll go through that in the fall. We'll kind of we'll evaluate at the end of the season and then determine what our next steps are going forward.
Football season tickets are on sale now, by the way, and some really great incentives are available. Prizes you can get if you sign up early for football season tickets. Should be a great 2020 football season with Chris Kleiman and the guys. You can check out more there on kstatesports.com. All right, our last question comes about football, and I think it's really more just in the parking lots in general. This is the first one. I've never heard this question before. It comes from @DanMerker on Twitter. Are there any plans for electric vehicle parking spots around the sports complex with all the renovations?
That was a great question. I did see that on Twitter, and you know, I actually really haven't thought about it. Obviously, when I was in Fargo, there was a lot of plug-ins, but it wasn't just to keep your engine from freezing. But you know, there's a lot more electric vehicles out there, and I don't know what the cost would be of that as we do some renovations. It's something that probably a good question for us to take forward to our architects and our construction folks. But it's a great question and something that hadn't crossed my mind, but makes a lot of sense.
It certainly does. That was one that I thought, boy, that's interesting, and we'll have to. Jeremy's head will probably explode if we give it to him.
That's the last thing he needs is that question.
Jeremy Niederwater does a fantastic job with the facilities here and the plans, the big projects, the main projects. Appreciate the time. I know it's a busy time of year. Basketball is nearing the end of the season. It's been a kind of a tough year. You spoke very well about the men's basketball team the other day for our all-staff meeting and just how hard they're continuing to work here at the end of the year.
You know, I had a chance to visit with them, and it is hard. You know, one of my favorite parts of my job is watching our athletes prepare and compete and have success. I know how hard they work. I know how much time and effort they put in. One of the hardest part of my jobs is when they prepare and they aren't having the success they would like. The frustration, I hurt for them. I know how hard our teams work. I'm very proud of our men's basketball coaches and staff and the fact that they are working extremely hard every game and they want to continue to win and be successful. I feel terrible for the seniors, but they're representing K-State at a high level, and they're going to continue to battle the rest of the season and do what they can. And I think they've got a lot of future still ahead of them. Just this season alone. And women, they're playing well right now. They're putting themselves in a position to finish in the top part of the Big 12 and position themselves for hopefully an NCAA playoff run. Yep,
we should see what the Wildcats will do. Women will probably head, at this point, looks like they're headed to postseason play one way or the other.
One way or the other.
Appreciate the time, Gene. Thanks very much.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Thanks for everybody for being patient and great questions.
No doubt. Keep them coming. Well, for Gene Taylor, for our producer and director, Preston Kerner, I'm Brian Smoller. Thank you for watching Ask the AD.